I originally started this channel as a way to promote concealed carry, to promote the classes that I was teaching at the time. And what I'm going to do with this series is kind of get back to the foundation of my channel. And I'm inviting you guys to come along with me in this journey. And now what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be talking about some basic elements of concealed carry as far as what you need to know. And there again, guys, this is going to be a video series, so be sure to subscribe to my channel. Be sure to follow along as we go through this. Now, I will tell you that the members of my channel will get the first access to all these videos. So if you want to become a channel member, help support what we do here, go over to my main page and you can join there. And guys, all of my channel members out there, I really appreciate you guys. Also, go down, check out all the links down below, become a member and join down there. You know, help support the channel where you can, especially with all the craziness that YouTube has been doing lately. What we're going to be doing in this video, just to get started, is I want to take time to talk about concealed carry, what it is not, and give you some of the basis, some of the things to think about when considering carrying a firearm. Number one, whether you are experienced with guns or not. First thing that you need to do is be willing to get some training. It does not matter that you've been shooting ever since you were knee high to a frog. Get out there, get some training, find a good instructor, and get training. Go beyond that. Regularly train. Get that training down pat. Now, the first thing that you need to do as part of that training, you need to understand the laws in the area where you are. Okay? You need to know what those laws are. You do not have the same protections or the same legal authority as a police officer. I don't care what people out there say online. I know you're going to find folks that say virtually everything out there that you could possibly imagine. But the reality is, you do not have the same legal authority as a police officer. You are a private citizen. You don't have any more special rights than any other citizen in this country. And there again, depending on where you are, what you're doing, the district you're doing, you can get yourself in some pretty serious trouble. Back several years ago, when Kentucky, the state where I'm at, actually went constitutional carry, there were a lot of folks that got themselves in some trouble, regardless of what was said, regardless of what they thought. The law was set to go in effect at a certain date. Just because that law had passed, there were folks out there that decided to go ahead, jump in, and start carrying a firearm without having a concealed carry license. Now, Kentucky is an open carry state. It always has been ever since its beginning. But concealed carry is a different discussion. Up until that point, we had restrictions on concealed carry. They were kind of loosely enforced in a lot of areas. In fact, most of the state, they were very loosely enforced. But you did have some elements in law enforcement, as well as others, that would enforce them. In certain areas, especially, if you got smart with a cop and you were carrying a gun concealed, chances are they're going to charge you with carrying a concealed weapon. That's just how things were in the state forever, even before there was concealed carry. So you need to know what those laws are. You can say what you want as far as what they should be or anything else. That's what they are. That's what they were. People were carrying prior to that law going into effect, and many of them got themselves arrested. Now, another thing you need to do is you need to know what those lines are as far as what would be considered a justifiable self-defense case and something that is not. Okay, there is a line there. There is a difference. Something that is justifiable, you have a legal standing on something. But in something that is not justifiable, if you're not justified in defending yourself against someone or a particular situation, then you need to know that. And if you don't know that, there again, you're going to become the criminal. They're going to put you in jail regardless of what it is. Certain districts, certain places throughout the country are very strict on that. Some more than others. We know what's happened in crazy places like New York City. If you're from New York City, let me know down in the comments below. Just say hi. Just tell us where you're from. Tell us about some of those crazy stories up there. I'd like to hear them. And the reality is up there, even in a case that most of the country that it would be a clear case of self-defense. I'm talking about the Daniel Perry case, or the Daniel Penny, which are one of those two. There's two different cases there. And something that should have been a clear case of self-defense up there because of the corruption in their political system and their judicial system up there, that man went to jail for literally trying to protect himself as well as other people from someone that was doing violence. That's the unfortunate reality. Just because there's something written on a law book, even here, just throughout the country, just because something is written on a law book does not necessarily mean that that's what the court is going to hold initially. Okay, there's case law. Say what you want about it. That's just the way the things are, and that's what I want to focus on here. I'm focusing on facts. But the starting point is to get some training to where you understand the basic elements of the law, where you reside, and where you travel to. Because if you live in one state, but you frequently travel to another state, when you are in that other state, the laws of that state are going to apply to you while you are in that state. So don't be fooled by that. Just because, one state has constitutional carry does not mean that you are going to be given that same privilege, that same right, if you go to a state that currently does not have it. Okay? It's that simple, guys. So don't get yourself in trouble. But these are just a few of the key points. First of all, you need to understand those legal principles. That is the basis of it. You've got to know what you can do legally, because you don't want to become the criminal yourself. You don't want to give people that are opposed to concealed carry, that want to limit our rights, you don't want to give them any kind of ammunition to further their side of the discussion. Okay, so that's the basis of it, guys. This is basically what I'm doing in this first video. What I'm going to be doing in the next video, which you're going to be able to go over and see at the end of this video, is we're actually going to look at some of the different types of guns, some of the things that you should consider when selecting a defensive firearm. What we're going to be doing in this video is actually talking about some of the things to consider when selecting a defensive firearm. The first thing and the most critical thing to consider when trying to decide on a firearm for self-defense is the gun reliable? If the gun is not reliable, you do not need to carry that gun. And the only way that you are going to know if that gun is reliable is to get it out to the range and shoot it. Take it to training courses, running those drills, seeing how it's going to perform. If that gun fails in training, then that is a gun that you do not want to have or to carry with you in the event of something happening. Because again, if it's going to fail in training, that's where you learn. That's where you learn what your equipment does, what it will do, what it will not do. Okay, now the second thing that you need to remember is do not let someone else decide for you the gun you should carry. It needs to be a personal choice. It needs to be a decision that you make yourself. The gun needs to be something that you are comfortable with, that you are accurate with. And I will just tell you out there, guys, we are in the golden age of firearms, but at the same time, there are a lot of junk guns out there on the market, so beware. Now, you also need to consider how that gun is going to fit in your hands. This is my Glock 43X. This gun, or a SIG 365, the XL model, is as small as I personally would go. That is because with this gun, I can still get a full grip on the gun. Some of these small, subcompact, these super compact micro guns, you cannot get a good grip on them, which means that you are not going to have good recoil management, and especially under stress, you're not going to be able to fire accurate shots, but simply because you cannot get a good grip on that gun. A SIG 365 XL, which I do have one, is another valid option. Another thing, and this is purely my personal opinion, I will not go smaller than a 9mm. I know that there are 380s out there on the market. There's all kinds of different technologies and ammunition, but still, based upon the power of the round, the cartridges, there is, in my opinion, no benefit with going with anything smaller than a 9mm for a defensive firearm. I have had people come into my classes that have brought these subcompact, these super tiny 380 pistols, and they ended up shooting the class with one of my guns, a larger caliber, but at the same time, it was one that they could get a grip on. And with that good grip, they were able to better manage the recoil of that firearm. And when the class was over, it was very clear that they decided that they were going to step up to a gun that they could get a good grip on. So that's just my own personal preference, guys. And you know, one of the ladies that come and took one of my classes a few years ago, she had a 380, and she told me that it felt like the gun was jumping out of her hands. She then shot the class with one of my Glock 19s and had no issues, preferred that gun, and in my understanding, she actually ended up buying one of those guns. So now, the next thing that you want to remember is you need to look for a gun that is designed for the purpose of concealed carry or a defensive use firearm. Something like this. This is Mechanic Meta. This gun is a wonderful gun. It is a very accurate gun. This gun has been super reliable, and in the role of a concealed carry firearm, this could function. However, I personally do not think that it is the best choice, and here's why. This gun is primarily designed as more of a competition model. There are several within the Canic lineup that are similar to that. The Canic TTI Combats. I have one of those. I've got videos on it on my channel. Go over to my channel and check it out. Those guns are wonderful for competition. They have a super crisp trigger. The triggers on these guns is absolutely amazing. It's just, you have a little bit of take up and you hit that wall right about there and it just goes. Do people carry these guns for their concealed carry firearm? Yes. It's their preference. And again, guys, this is a lot my opinion. My opinion, I would not. And the reason that I would not is because of that super clean, super light trigger. In a stressful situation, under a, when you are in literally the most stressful time that you could possibly be in, trying to protect your life, you are going to have adrenaline flowing like crazy. Okay, you are going to be hit with an intoxicant known as adrenaline, and if you were in a situation to where your finger is on that trigger, you're probably not even going to notice that you've pressed that trigger. That adrenaline is going to be so high that you will, you could press that trigger and not even know it. You don't want that. You want to know when you are going to break that shot, when you have decided to press that trigger in self-defense. Okay, not saying that you could not defend yourself with one of these guns. That is not correct. This would work well. This would be able to fire the ammunition well, a defensive load ammunition. And that is another key point. You need to make sure that the firearm you choose will fire the cartridges you decide to go with. There's a ton of different guns on the market that will fire any type of target load out there, but that they are not designed for the plus P loads or the hollow points. Whatever type of ammunition you choose to carry, that is what you need to make sure will run in your gun. Okay, be clear about that. If it will not run in your gun in practice and training, then it does not need to be a ammunition that you carry. Okay, if your gun will run one type of defensive ammunition but not another, that should be something that you consider as well. Another choice that's on the market, and this is one that is very popular among a lot of people, is the 1911. This is my TSOS 1911 stainless carry. I love this gun. This gun is one of the 1911s that I have that I will occasionally carry if I decide to carry a 1911. This particular gun has possibly the best trigger on it of any of my 1911s. It is super crisp. It is like a glass rod. This is, again, one of those guns that would work. Okay, there's very little take up on this, and then I get to that wall there and it just fires. The reset on it is approximately right there, and it goes again. This trigger is still light. This trigger is one that, as I had mentioned previously, It almost could be a little too light, but again, it depends on what you are familiar with, what type of training that you have invested yourself in. If you go through your training classes and you have that super light trigger, then by all means, go and carry that gun. You carry what works for you, not what I tell you. This is just my opinion. Me, as light as that trigger is on this, I'm not going to say I would never carry it. It's just it would not be my first choice. Something else to consider on the 1911 is two things. One is the ammunition capacity, and there again, that goes with any of the guns that you carry. The other thing is the size of the ammunition, the caliber, and whether or not you can manage that recoil, because if you cannot manage that recoil, then the gun might be a little too large for you. This is 45 ACP. If you cannot effectively manage the recoil of a 45 ACP, then step down, because it is better for you to hit your target with a smaller caliber firearm than it is to miss them with a larger caliber firearm. Step down to something that you are comfortable with, that you can manage the recoil of. If you're out there on the range and you're finding that you are more concerned about controlling the recoil of that gun, then that is too large of a caliber for you to carry. Okay, step down, go to a smaller size. The other thing to consider, as I mentioned, is the capacity, the total number of rounds in the gun. We see a rise this day and age of multiple attacker incidents. Okay, do you have enough ammunition to be able to deal with multiple threats? Okay, you do not need to run out of ammo. You need to make sure that your gun is going to have enough rounds to carry enough rounds that it will take care of the threat, whatever it is. Okay, you need to make sure of that. Now, there again, guys, we're not talking about trying to live a life of like a soldier overseas would, to where we're carrying ridiculous amounts of ammo. Where you live at may influence that. Some states, some locations limit the total number of rounds that you can have in your gun. That's something to consider. What type of gun you choose goes back to all of the things that we've talked about so far. Something that is reliable, something that you are accurate with, something that you are proficient with. 1911s can be one option. They can be one option for you. That crisp trigger, these are a heavier gun. That some people like the fact that they are hammer fired. The sights, many of the guns out there these days have a lot of new features. The sights can be replaced, upgraded to whatever. There's a lot of features on these. Just like this gun here, I've upgraded the grips on it. This palm swell grip, these are lock grips. Check the link down below in the description of the video to where you can go over and check them out. But make sure that whatever gun you choose is one that's going to work for you. Another thing to consider, of course, this being a 45, there are just some calibers that are too large for some people. This gun here is my Glock 20. This is a 10 millimeter. This is a gun that is a beast, as far as like the recoil. It has a much more recoil, a much harder recoil, a much stouter recoil than a Glock 19, Glock 43X, a 9mm round. This gun does have much more recoil, and you need to be able to manage that recoil. Okay, this gun with my hands, it fits my hands fine. Some other folks might find this gun uncomfortable due to the fact of the size of that grip. Okay, a 1911, a 45 ACP, and there again, you can get these chambered in other calibers as well. My opinion on 9mm 1911s. If it is an area that limits you to 10 rounds, and again, this is my personal opinion, you can choose to carry one if you so to do so. However, if you are carrying a 9mm 1911, remember that you are limited on your ammunition capacity. If you live in a more free part of the country, that may work for you. It's just, again, your choice, because by comparison, this gun here, standard capacity magazine is 10 rounds. This is a 43X. I know retired police officers, in fact, one is a friend of mine. This is his everyday carry. He carries regularly a 43X. That's his choice to carry. Of course, where we are, There's not a lot of violence. This is a very good area. You liberals will hate it here because it is extremely conservative and an extremely pro-gun. So just remember that, guys. This gun here is much heavier. Okay, I can get the same capacity, and actually a couple of rounds more, in this than I could this, even with the 10-round magazines that you can get for these. And of course, you know, I'm referring to the 9mm version, using this as an example. You can get those higher capacity magazines for the 1911 and have a couple more rounds in there, but look at the size difference. Again, this is just something for you to consider. Not saying that you would be making the wrong choice if you decided to carry a 1911. There's a lot of folks out there that regularly carry a 1911 and they're very proficient with them. This here is a much lighter gun. It is you know, a little more concealable, but back to the old saying, and I think that Clint Smith is one that has made this statement, and I know I'll probably mess up his quote, but they're all too big for concealment. None of them are too big to fight with, or something to that effect. You guys let me know what the exact quote is down in the comments below. These are just a few choices, a few things to talk about, and there's a lot of different guns on the market these days that are very affordable. You can have good guns that are affordable. Don't spend your money on these junk guns that you think you might save a few dollars on when you can get something that is much more reliable. Canik is a good manufacturer. They have some different ones out there that are designed for concealed carry that are just phenomenal. We have a lot of Glock clones coming on the market. There are some of them that are good, some not so good. This is a Bear Creek Arsenal Grizzly. This is a Glock clone. For not much more than what you would pay for one of those high points or something like that, you could get something that is a little bit better of a gun, in my opinion. There's also Taurus. You have a lot of other manufacturers out there that are making decent guns, but regardless of the manufacturer, even if you go out and spend the money and get a Glock 19 like this one right here, get it to the range. Put the rounds through it with the defensive ammunition that you're going to carry to know that this gun is going to run the way that you need it to. And I wanted to take just a few minutes for those of you guys out there that are new to firearms, just to give you some basic understandings of firearm safety. And it's real important that we do this and we pay careful attention to the fundamentals of safety for various reasons. The reason that I like teaching safety and emphasizing safety so heavily is because every time there is an accident with a gun, that's just a little bit more ammunition that goes to the folks who are opposed to the Second Amendment. So the safer we can be, the more that we can reduce accidents with guns, the less opportunities they have at using accidents against us. And if we can reduce the number of accidents, that's things that they cannot talk about in their push for gun control. Now, the first rule of gun safety is to never assume that a gun is unloaded. You know, you always assume that the gun is loaded. You treat that gun as it is, if it is loaded. And looking at the three guns that I've got laid out here on the table, I would like for you guys to take just a minute and ask yourselves which one of those three guns is loaded. There is no physical way that you can look at those guns and tell if one of them is loaded or not. You've got to check. Always check, you double check, and then you triple check. If someone hands you a gun, if they check that gun in front of you, it's always a good idea for you to check it yourself. You never know if they've missed something. With a semi-automatic is you want to pick it up, keep your finger off of the trigger, keep it pointed in a safe direction. You'll notice that my finger is up closer to where the chamber is. This is what we call high index. You don't want to have your finger down here close to that trigger where something could hit it and actually push your finger into that trigger. So keep it up high. Now, the first thing that you want to do with a semi-automatic when to safety check it is, of course, drop the magazine. And you can see here there is nothing in that magazine. However, just because you take the magazine out, do not assume that that gun is unloaded at that time. You want to keep it in a safe direction as always, keep the finger off the trigger, and then you want to cycle that action back and lock it open. And I want you to look here. This is a snap cap that I had in this gun.
There have been people that have assumed a gun was unloaded just because there was nothing in the magazine and ended up shooting someone or themselves. So you always want to make sure that the gun is unloaded. Visually check that chamber, also physically check that chamber, run that finger in there. And the reason that you want to physically check that chamber is if you're ever in a room that's a little dark, where you can't necessarily see everything around you, that's a good way to ensure that there is nothing in that chamber. So then once you've done that, of course, you can then close the action. Do not treat a gun recklessly just because you've checked to see that it's unloaded. We had talked earlier about why you want to drop the magazine out and you want to drop it out first, and I just want to show you why. And we're going to use a snap cap here to demonstrate that. And you can see this is not a real bullet. This is a snap cap that you can get. I will put a link to my Amazon store down in the comments, my link to my Amazon page, and you can find some snap caps as well as some other things there. So I'm going to put that snap cap in this magazine. I have seen people, when they would go to check to see if a gun was unloaded, they would pull that action back, look to see that there's currently nothing in the chamber, as you can see here, but then when they let it go, I want you to show you something. That snap cap is not in the magazine any longer. Where's it at? It is in the chamber of that gun. Just like that right there. That is why whenever you check a semi-automatic, you want to make sure that the first thing you do is to drop that magazine. And it's the same way with this 1911. Any gun out there with a semi-automatic, the first thing that you want to do, drop that magazine out, check the magazine, and then check the action. Lock that action back, then you can physically and visually check inside there. Again, you cannot look at any of these guns to see if they're loaded or unloaded. Just like with this one, there was a snap cap in the chamber. Now let's go over to this one. Pull it out, and look, we do have ammunition in the magazine. Is there anything in the chamber? That's what we need to know for sure. I'll pull that action back, I'll lock it back, and look, we do have a live round in the chamber of this gun. This is my carry gun, so yes, it was loaded. So I'm going to put that back down. I'm going to just put my round back in the magazine for when I reload it. And that is the first rule of gun safety, is to never assume that a gun is unloaded. You always check, you always double check. Go through the extra step after someone has checked a gun in front of you. Take that extra time, check that gun for yourself. The next thing to remember is to always keep your finger off the trigger. I'd mentioned just a brief moment ago about that. But most guns are not going to discharge if you do not press that trigger. I mean, and just again, we're going to make sure that we're unloaded. There is nothing in this particular gun, okay? That gun is not going to fire. I can slap it, I can hit it back here. You know, there are some guns available out there, used market, and then others, manufacturers come out and have problems with their gun that can have a drop safety issue, and we've seen some recalls from SIG and from others because of that over the years. But in most cases, if you do not press the trigger, you are not going to have a discharge on that gun. There are some instances where you can have a malfunction in the gun. We had mentioned the drop safeties earlier, and that is one reason why, even though you keep your finger off the trigger, you always want to keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Another very important thing to remember is to know your target. Always be aware of your target and what is behind it. Hollywood has done a big disservice to their portrayal of guns and what they can do and what they can't do. We see in a lot of movies where people will hide behind doors of cars, they will hide behind sheetrock walls, and those walls will get all shot up, and the people have just come right back out and shoot at the opponents, and shoot at their whoever is against them. But at the same time, in reality is those bullets will go through those walls, and several just like them in most cases. So you always want to be sure of your target and what is behind it.
What we're going to do is to go over some things that will help you to increase your accuracy when it comes to pistol shooting. One of the challenges that we need to overcome in shooting a handgun is the shorter sight radius. In order to ensure that you have an accurate shot, you need to have a good firm stance, a good firm grip on the weapon, and proper trigger control. You need to be sure that you have a good grip on your handgun. There are a lot of aftermarket accessories available today that will allow you to customize the grips on most firearms to fit your hand.
Now, when you grip your pistol, the first thing that you want to do is you want to make the gun an extension of your arm. You want to have that gun in line with the bone in your arm. You do not want to have it where it is cocked around like this or like that. You want to have it just as an extension, just if you were going to be pointing at something. That is how you want the gun to be lined up in your hand. You want that webbing that is between your thumb and finger to be right in the middle of the back strap on that gun. You also want to be as high as possible on the back strap of the gun. That way it's going to give you a little bit better control and recoil management, because a gun is basically like a lever. The further you are away from that twisting point, from that recoil, from where that round is going to go off, the more it's going to twist on you. So if you can get up here as close as possible, right in line with that bore axis as much as possible, the gun is going to have more of a push backwards instead of having that muzzle flip. You're going to get a lot more muzzle flip if you do not have a proper grip on your gun, because your hand is going to be further away from that bore axis. So make sure that you get up underneath there as much as possible. But you do not want to get your grip so high that it's going to be interfering with the action. Make sure that your hand does not, or any of the meat of your hand, your thumb or anything, make sure it does not get above that slide. At the range, the first time that we go to the range, I have occasionally seen some to when they grip their gun, they would do something very improper and something that could get them hurt. I've seen people grip guns like this. I've seen people grip them like that. I've seen even one guy actually done something like this. And of course, in each situation like that, it's an improper grip, and it's also a way that you can hurt yourself. You're going to have just a little bit of an opening between your fingers and then back here where your thumb is, and that's where you're going to take your support hand and you are going to press it into that opening and then roll your fingers around that gun to where you do not have any gaps or anything. I do see people occasionally, they'll come over here like this, there'll be a little bit of a gap in there. You do not want that gap. You want to fill in that gap with your hand. As you are gripping that gun, you want to keep your wrists straight. You can see here my thumbs are parallel to the way the gun is, and a proper grip is something that's going to help you to overcome a little bit of error in your trigger control. We see people online on different YouTube videos all the time talking about your grip, about how your trigger control is not as critical. I disagree with that. I think the trigger control is still very important, even with the gun in a virtual vise with your hands. That strong, proper grip, if you have that proper trigger control, you are still going to make a much more accurate shot. There's people that do a lot of wild things out. I've actually seen where people would have someone else come along and with a screwdriver or something like that, as someone is holding a gun, smack that trigger and they would still get shots on target. But those shots would be much more accurate with that proper trigger control. When you do grip your gun, you want to have a slight forward pressure with your primary hand and then a slight back pressure with your support hand. And what that does is it really helps to lock down
that gun to keep it from movement. Trigger control is a big component, as I've said in other videos. When you grip your firearm, the grip that you get might not be the perfect grip that you should have when you draw, and typically that grip is going to be the one that you have throughout the duration of the incident. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to jump in. I'm going to show you this practice technique, and then we'll be right back. And what we're going to be using is my Glock 43X. Smaller firearms tend to have a little bit different trigger feel than a lot of their larger counterparts, and that's going to depend on the manufacturer, the gun in particular. This is a dry fire exercise that you can use to help improve your accuracy. Of course, what we will be doing, the purpose of this is to work on our trigger control. Now, what we will be doing, I'm going to be taking a dime, placing it on the front sight post of this firearm, extending out, and the focus or the goal of this is to not allow that coin to fall off when I press the trigger. What tends to happen, a lot of folks will jerk the trigger as they go to fire, and this technique is intended to help reduce that. Now I've got the coin out there. I'm going to begin building pressure on the trigger. You can see there the coin fell off, and that is because I jerked that trigger. Okay, so let's reset and try it again. Let's reset this. Let's get that coin back on that front sight post. Now, depending on your firearm and how those front sights are made, this may or may not work for you. That is something that you will need to pay attention to. Now, here we go again. I am going to build pressure on that trigger, build pressure, and that time you saw the coin stayed on there, and that is because I applied the proper pressure, the proper technique. I did not jerk that trigger the way I did in that previous shot. But guys, this is just a simple technique that you can use to help improve your accuracy with a firearm. The Glock 43X, of course, is a very popular concealed carry firearm, and it is one that is perfect for this type of exercise. You know, whatever you carry is what you will want to use this exercise with. This, of course, is one of my concealed carry firearms, so it's one that does come with me regularly, and that's why I like to practice with it regularly. What we have here is my Glock 19X. We're going to use it for this video demonstration, and of course proper trigger control is pressing that trigger all the way from its forward position through the shot without disturbing that sight picture. Go over to my channel, check out other videos that I've got on sight picture, grip, and that sort of thing. Okay, but what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to jump behind the camera and give you a close-up view. Okay guys, here's the technique that I'm talking about. When you grip your firearm, what you want to make sure of is that you're very familiar with how the take-up feels on that gun, okay? Now, every gun out there has a little bit of take-up. The best trigger out there will have a slight amount of take-up, okay? And what we're going to do here, you'll see I press this trigger back to where it hits the wall. For the Glock triggers, you guys out there familiar with Glocks, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Same is true with mini striker fired pistols. Once I hit that wall and I get to that point, what I want to do is refocus my sight picture, okay? Have your focus, your main focus, to be on that front sight post, and as you get that wall, make sure that you properly realign that sight picture. Okay, hold that realignment and then just gradually build pressure on that trigger until the shot breaks. Okay, just like that. Okay, it's a very simple process, guys. Now what we're going to do is actually fire a shot with this technique. It's a little difficult for me to aim through the camera, but this video is intended to give you a better understanding of the proper technique of this. Typically when you go to press that trigger, you know, people will misalign that sight picture. You know, as they begin to press that trigger, they will move that sight picture. That's why if you press to that wall before you build the pressure and actually fire that shot, refocus that sight picture, okay? Now, I will probably miss just because of the way that I'm aiming, but we're still going to try this technique. It's a good technique as well. The first time that I do this, I've got a couple of rounds loaded in the magazine, but right now the chamber is not loaded. So what I'm going to do, I am going to practice this technique, and there again, it's a good dry fire exercise. I am going to put my finger on the trigger. I'm going to go to the wall. I'm going to refocus on the target on that front sight post, okay? front sight focus is what you want to be doing. Okay, refocus, realign that, and then keep building pressure as you maintain that sight picture. Keep building pressure all the way through until the shot breaks. Now that's my dry fire. I'm going to cycle a round into that chamber, and we're going to repeat this. Okay, only this time we have a live round. So I am going to build pressure on that trigger. I am going to pull it back to the wall. Okay, I'm going to refocus my sight picture. Okay, refocusing that sight picture. I'm going to continue to build pressure, build pressure, build pressure, and the shot broke. Okay, that's what you want to do. Okay, you want to make sure that you realign that front sight post, that front sight picture, with each shot that you make. Okay, again, to the wall, I am realigning, building pressure till the shot breaks. Okay, one more time, let's go through this. Build pressure, okay, just like that, guys. That's the technique that you want to do. That's what you want with your trigger control. Guys, there's a lot of folks online in these gun forums and stuff like that that are going to re-emphasize grip, and they're going to ignore trigger control. That is a mistake. Under stress, if you draw your firearm, chances are you will not have the perfect grip on that gun. Okay, you need to train, you need to refine your technique and get it as close to perfection as you can, but still, under stress, the chances are those techniques are not going to be perfect. Okay, that is one of many reasons why you want to have proper trigger control when shooting your firearm. Okay, not just that good strong grip, which we do need. You want to have that good trigger control, because if you have a minor mistake in that grip when you draw that firearm, you're going to need to depend on that trigger control much more. Chances are, in a fight, the grip that you have on that gun once you draw it from the holster is the grip that you're going to have throughout the duration of that fight. The placement of your trigger finger is another key component in making sure that you have your handgun under real good control. If you have too much of your finger pressed through that trigger, you have a tendency to wobble the handgun. The same is true if you have too little. You will simply wobble it the other way. So you need to find a good medium between having too much trigger finger and too little trigger finger. To give you a little better understanding of what I'm talking about, I am intentionally going to put just the very tip of my finger onto this trigger, and as I squeeze that trigger, I want you to notice the action of the sight. You can see the sight there, and when I go to squeeze that trigger, you can actually see that I'm deflecting the gun slightly to the left. If I were to actually fire that shot, it is completely changing my shot picture, my sight picture, and will cause me to miss where I had intended to hit. If I go the other way and I put too much finger through into the trigger well, when I squeeze the trigger, then you can see just the opposite effect. It is actually pulling the handgun slightly to the right. What you want to do is you want to find just the right media between pushing that trigger straight back and being able to keep your sights directly on target. For me, the ideal spot is to have the trigger hit slightly in front of the knuckle on my finger. That way I am able to squeeze that trigger and have very little movement in the handgun. When you go to aim at your target, one of the first things that you need to do is to ensure that you are focused not on your target, not on the rear sight, but on the front sight. That is where your focus needs to be when aiming. You need to make sure that the top of the front sight is even with the top of your rear sight as well. You can't stress that enough. If you have it up above, you will shoot high. If you have it down below, you will shoot low. Here's my sight picture. I'm focused heavily on the front sight. I have the front sight even with the rear sight, and I am bisecting the center of the target. With the correct stance and correct trigger pull, when I fire the shot, I should hit right in the middle of that target. Now, of course, I am actually wrapping around the camera to show you this, so it's a little hard to hold the gun as stable as it needs to be. Guys, I'm loaded up, and we are going to actually fire this shot using the viewfinder of the camera, using the techniques that we've discussed in this video, and see just exactly how well they work.
Alright guys, if you look at our target, you can see that we're just slightly off to the left. Now looking through that viewfinder, you can see in the video, target was way more out of focus than what it would normally be if you were shooting. However, you know, from about 8 yards back, I'd say that that's not too awful bad. You know, we're slightly to the left once again, but as far as our elevation, that right there is where we need to be. You know, once again, keeping that top plane of those sights even.
It would be impossible in a single video to cover every type of holster that's available on the market, but I want to give you an idea of some things that you need to look for when you go to purchase a holster for your firearm. A big mistake that a lot of people make once they buy a gun is that they will go out and buy just a cheap holster to carry that gun with, thinking that it will be fine, that all holsters are just alike, when in reality, that's not true. Not all holsters are created equal. A holster should be seen as an investment, just like your firearm. If you invest in a good holster, you're going to get a much better result with that holster than you would just anything out on the market, especially when you're talking about concealed carry holsters. There are some concealed carry holsters that borderline medieval torture devices instead of concealed carry holsters. So they're just very uncomfortable. They do not work very well. And those are some of the things that you're going to need to consider when you go to purchase your holsters. Any holster that you're thinking about buying needs to be made to fit your particular gun. You do not need to get a holster that is too small. You do not need to get one that is too loose on your gun. It needs to be able to fit that gun. It needs to be designed to fit that gun. The first thing that you want to consider is, does it cover the trigger? Now, all guns in this video have been safety checked. I'm not going to take all the time to show you all of that on video, but they have been safety checked. But every holster needs to cover that trigger very well. If it does not cover that trigger, if you are carrying it, you know, and you have it in a holster that is exposing that trigger, that is very risky. If something gets in there, if you catch that trigger on something, you can have a negligent discharge simply because the trigger was not covered properly. There are many holsters on the market that are universal, that will fit a few different firearms types, such as this Bianchi holster here. This holster features a thumb brake type of retention system, and it will actually fit my 92, and it will also fit my Smith & Wesson. It will just slip right in there, and with no problem whatsoever, it will fit that as well. That's a universal type holster that does fit both of these firearms. Different manufacturers will have just a little bit difference in their makes and models on the way that they make their universal holsters. But again, one thing that you want to check on any holster that you're considering is that it covers that trigger. If it does not cover that trigger, do not use that holster for that particular firearm. A very common holster found on the market is just your standard paddle holster. This is one that I have that fits my Glocks very well. These holsters in general will, they're very affordable, and for most part, they do a very good job. This one comes with an adjustable retention. Basically, it just form fits the gun, and that's another reason, especially on these, that you need to make sure that the holster you buy is designed for your gun. I can adjust the tension, the force that it uses to pull this gun out with the adjustment screw right here. You can get these too tight, and again, you can't have them too loose. It just really depends on how well you want that firearm to stay in the holster. You know, right now, it's not going to fall out of there. It's in, I've got it set about where I like it. I don't want it too tight, but at the same time, I don't want it too loose either. I just don't want it falling out. That's one type of holster that I have for this gun. Another type is the Serpa retention holster. These are very popular as well. This type of holster actually features a mechanism that hooks around the trigger guard on your gun, and you can hear the click, that will lock it in place. Once it is in place, you must press that release in order to draw that gun from the holster. The location of that mechanism is right along the frame of your gun. When you press that in and draw it, your finger is indexed along the frame outside of the trigger guard. Now, these particular holsters have gotten a bad reputation from some due to basically training errors, people doing things with them that they should not. But of course, the main thing is a training error. We see people that get into doing this quick draw stuff with hair triggers on guns, you know, that they've modified their triggers on, and end up shooting themselves in the leg. And that's kind of giving these holsters a bad reputation. However, the holster is not at fault, it's the operator. One of the things that people will do a lot of times is they will use the tip of their finger to push in on that, and when they push in and just grabbing it, doing the quick draw, a lot of times it will fall right into that trigger well and cause a negligent discharge. This particular holster is, again, a paddle holster, and the way that it will help to grip onto your pants is this little hook here. The Phobos that you've seen earlier, the way that it is, you can kind of see the ridge that is along this, and then when you have it in your pants underneath, this will kind of hook underneath your belt, kind of along your waist area around your belt, where this has an entire ridge that goes all the way across. This one has just a single hook. Both of these do seem to work very well when you know, wearing these holsters. These of course are outside the waistband holsters. I wear these regularly, you know, and especially in fall, spring, when you're wearing a jacket, just throw the jacket over it and you're fine, no problem. If you've seen some of my other videos, you've seen me using these holsters. There are many other holsters out on the market that kind of specialty holsters, of course, for deep concealment and that sort of thing. This is an inside the waistband holster. Now, the reason that this one looks the way that it does is this is a holster that I've actually made. There are holsters similar to this commercially available, but I like playing around in my shop making things, and I just decided to try to make some, and I actually made some holsters that work very well for me. These have a clip that you can slip the entire holster inside your waist. These clips do very well at holding them in place, and it will allow you to actually tuck in your shirt with this holster. It works real well for deep concealment, and it holds the firearm very well. It's leather and Kydex. I'm sure that you've seen many of these available on the market. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that are making them. And the thing that I like about this holster is when you draw your firearm, and that's something to consider when carrying inside the waist, that Kydex, that hard outer case, will actually hold the form and allow you to reholster that gun without having to remove the holster. I know some of your other inside the waist holsters that are cloth, I've had some over the years that when you have them inside your waist, as soon as you draw that gun, that holster just collapses. And then in order to get that firearm back in, you've got to pull that holster out and then reholster it. Now there's ways to reholster it without taking it out, but you're putting yourself at risk, especially if you carry with a round in the chamber. Some other things to consider on your holsters is, does the holster cover the entire frame of the gun? There are many on the market that do not. Again, a couple that I've made. Here's one that I made for one of mine. You can see that this holster covers the entire frame. This is just a simple belt outside the pants, pancake style holster. It covers the entire frame. But another one that I made, you can see that it does not, that the muzzle of the gun is sticking out past the holster. And one disadvantage of a holster like this is that this being exposed, if you are outside regularly working or something like that, like me when I'm out on my property, I generally have a firearm on me. When that muzzle is exposed like that, depending on what you're doing, you can, smack that against objects, things that you're around when you're out. And, these things are expensive, so you don't really want to damage your firearm. One good thing about this holster, though, is it is super compact, super lightweight. But that is something to consider. You don't want to damage a firearm that you paid a lot of money for. On the market also are fanny packs that are targeting the concealed carry market specifically, that will allow you to carry a firearm with you. I know that you don't see as many people using fanny packs today as you once did, but there's a lot of ladies out there who still use them. Drop your pistol in the fanny pack, have it on you, and that's a good way to carry a firearm concealed. One thing you do want to remember though, if you choose some type of a holster like this or a fanny pack for your concealed carry holster, you need to remember that you need a separate compartment just for your firearm. And the reason for that is if you have other things in there, keys, ink pens, whatever, if anything gets in there around that trigger, if you're carrying with a loaded chamber, you can have a negligent discharge, and that's something you do not want to do. We are legally and morally responsible for everything that happens with our firearms. You know, you can injure yourself, you can injure someone else. So you need to have a separate compartment if you are going to use a fanny pack like that to carry your firearm. And the same can be said with purses. This is one of my wife's purses, and this particular purse has a separate compartment just for a firearm. It's not very large, however, it does work. Now, one thing that I recommend on a purse like this is that you get a pocket holster for your particular gun. This is not going to fit in there. This is made for basically a mouse gun is what this one's made for. But a pocket holster that will cover the trigger guard, like we mentioned earlier, those are generally made for carrying a gun in the pocket of your clothing. If that is how you're going to carry, if you ladies out there, if you have a purse with concealed carry holster like that, get one of those pocket holsters to go in there. That way it kind of is formed more to your gun. It's better chances of it protecting your gun and holding your gun in place in your purse and not allowing it to turn one way or the other in there for when you do need it. Another type of holster that's on the market, especially for you guys that are into all the tactical gear, of course, are your tactical holsters. This particular holster is made to be able to be laced into some MOLLE if you have a plate carrier or if you have a pack that has MOLLE webbing. And they are generally a universal design that will hold a wide range of different firearms. They generally will feature some additional straps to help secure that firearm in place. You can see here this one has a thumb brake as well as this clip to keep that firearm secured. You know, if you have a plate carrier on, if you are, for whatever reason, a shooting vest, you don't really want that falling out, especially if it's not your primary firearm. You know, some type of competitions, you may see some of your guys wearing tactical gear, wearing something similar to this. You can get these both designed in vertical mounts as well as horizontal mounting to your webbing. It just really depends. Some of them will do both. They're generally ambidextrous. They're customizable for a wide range of firearms. Now these are rather large also. Again, they're made to go on the outside of a plate carrier or some other type of tactical gear, MOLLE webbing. But they are a very good option depending on how you want to carry your firearm. I know this one will fit on my camping pack very well. I'll have a concealed carry on me, but if I wanted to carry an additional firearm, I could simply put this onto the webbing of my pack, put a pistol in it, and away I go. Something that you need to remember is there is no universal industry standard for retention levels. You hear all the time holster companies advertising level 2 retention, level 3 retention. That basically just applies for their particular holster brands. There are many different ways that your holsters can retain your firearm. In this one, you can see that the retention of it is just a simple thumb brake. Just put your thumb, place it through there, push it down, unsnap it, and then you're able to draw your firearm. The other way that some holsters will retain your firearm, again, is just the pressure of the way that the holster is made. It just squeezes around the trigger guard and certain other areas around the firearm to keep it from falling out. It's just a friction retention type holster. Then of course the Serpa does have the mechanical lever. There are a few different options for these. I know that Serpa has a brand out for law enforcement that also has a hood that comes over the back of the firearm where you are required to push down on a lever in the back as well as push the release in the front to draw that firearm. And then still other holsters like this one, have a couple of different ways. It does have the thumb brake and then the additional strap, as I showed you just moments ago. Again, guys, no matter which holster you choose to carry your firearm in, make sure that it is one that covers that trigger completely. That is the best way to avoid any kind of accidental discharge with your firearm when it is holstered. Here's a couple of holsters that I got, and these are available on Amazon. I'll put a link down below. And both of these are for the same gun, my Glock 19, which is what you see here. But there are some differences, and that's what I wanted to talk about for any of you guys that are new to concealed carry. These are from Monolo, I believe that's how you pronounce it. But what we're going to do is simply open these up, and then we will talk about some of the differences in each of these holsters, give you some things to consider for yourself when trying to decide what type of holster that you want. And you can see here some of the stuff that we get with this holster. Looks like we've got a couple of clips, just depending on how I wanted to adjust this. You can see here that I could change that clip out if I wanted, and so on. Adjust the type or the way that it rides. So let's get this one out, and let's go ahead and also get the other one out, because these two holsters have some features that I wanted to point out and show you the similarities and differences in them. And what I wanted to begin with is, whenever you are looking for a holster for concealed carry, the first thing that you want to do is you want to look for a holster that is going to completely cover the trigger guard of your firearm. This is, of course, my Glock 19 running the XS Big Dot sights. I love these sights. I love these guns. I am a big fan of these sights. As I had mentioned, always make sure that the trigger is completely covered by the holster on any of your firearms. You can see here this holster covers this trigger very well. I do not have to worry about anything getting in there and accidentally hitting that holster or hitting that trigger and causing a negligent discharge. And now let's check the other one. And you can see here, fits very well, fits right in there just like a glove. Now you'll notice one of the big differences between these two holsters. This one has a padded back. Don't let this one fool you though. Even though it may not look like it, there is a little bit of padding on the back of this holster as well. It is just not as thick. Now, depending on what you want, what you would consider comfort level, there are some similarities and differences between these two holsters. This holster is completely basically like a taco style holster, where it is folded around, and then your gun would fit in there and you would carry it inside the waistband for concealed carry. This one is more of a hybrid type, where on the back side of this holster is the fabric material, in this case leather or simulated leather or whatever, that is the backing of that. And one of the trade-offs is the thickness. If you can see here, if I get these lined up properly, I get them about even, you can see that there is just a very slight difference in the thickness. Not a lot, but just a very slight difference. So depending on your needs, this is something for you to consider. Also, there's a lot of holster manufacturers out there that you do not get this type of a padding on the back of that holster. I can tell you from many years carrying concealed firearms, that is something that can be useful. Having that padding on the back will make that holster much more comfortable, especially if you're going to be carrying it all day. Something like this, it is a little bit of an additional padding, just depending on how you dress, what you're looking for, and it is something that would make it much easier having that firearm at the ready whenever you needed it to be. But again, that goes back to how you dress. Something like this directly against your skin, it's going to help keep that gun from rubbing you as much. Of course, this one does have some of that padding. This one might be a little more sticky to the skin, especially if you got to sweating and that sort of thing. But both would work well, just depending on what you needed for your particular application. You can adjust the tension on these. You can see here these screws here. If you needed to adjust that down, that's something that you would be able to do very easily. On this holster, you have a little bit of an adjustment right here just to squeeze it down a little bit more. But something else that you need to be aware of, whenever you are trying to adjust your holster, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't get it too tight, because when you put that holster on, that gun is going to be squeeze. I can't say the word for some reason, but you're going to get a lot of tension on that holster and that gun. So make sure that you don't make it too tight. Okay, if you have an adjustment screw on your holster like these do, you don't want to take you don't want to run that down too tight, because then it's going to make it difficult for you to get your gun out. Be sure to try it out, see how well it fits and how easy it is for you to draw if necessary. Okay, so that's something that you do need to remember. This holster, both of these holsters, they fit the guns very well. Again, this is my Glock 19. This one is my Gen 5. Great gun, love this gun. This is one of the earlier model Gen 5s. You can see there it has that little cutout on the front of the grip. Okay, on that front strap there, it's a little bit of a cutout. They stopped doing that fairly quickly, but mine, I got this one early enough to where it still has that. Now these holsters, very nice, I'll have to say. They're not the thickest of Kydex, but at the same time, you don't really necessarily need a super thick Kydex. It really depends on what you're going to do, the type of carry that you do, and what fits you, your body type, and that sort of thing. But just to show you guys what these look like, the clips, a fairly decent clip on each of these. Okay, fairly decent. Okay, I'll have to say I think that they're fairly decent. You do have a little bit of flex on this one just because of the way that it is there. Okay, and it would let you tuck into a certain amount depending on your shirt or whatever, how far down it would go. It does look like you would be able to tuck a shirt in slightly. That's something that some folks do not consider when they are buying a holster or whatever. You can tuck, if you have a little bit of a slot here, you can tuck your shirt in around that depending on how deep it is and all that sort of thing. And of course we did get some different brackets with one of them. Right here you can see here to where you can actually let it ride a little differently just depending on what you want to do. Okay, but anyways guys, I just wanted to show these two holsters to you and also talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to want to consider, especially if you are someone that is new to concealed carry. Okay, that's something that you want to think about, guys. Don't look at a holster just as an afterthought. Once you go out, you make the investment into a firearm for your self-defense. Make sure that you look at a decent holster. You know, these for concealed carry, I really like that padding on the back of this one. I think that's something that would be very comfortable.
We're going to talk about the very first drill that you should very regularly practice when you begin concealed carry, and not just when you begin it. This is something that you should continue doing throughout all of the time that you carry a firearm for self-defense. Basically what you want to do is come out to your range, have your firearm in an outside the waistband holster. Stand in front of your target, simply practice drawing and firing a shot. Okay, that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to make sure that I get that proper grip on my gun. Go back on my channel, check out some of those other videos where I talk about that. I'm going to make sure my support hand is somewhere on my body. I'm going to release any type of retention devices that I have. Make sure that your trigger finger is not on that trigger. I'm going to draw that firearm, rotate toward the target. I'm going to extend out, join with my secondary hand, take aim on that target, touch that trigger, and press that shot. Okay? And then reholstering is just the opposite. For this is my TSOS 1911 Raider. Any 1911 or gun with a manual safety, I want to make sure that I re-engage that manual safety, and just the opposite. I want to rotate it down and make sure that I have it back in that holster properly, just like that. Again, coming out to the range, standing in front of your target, drawing that gun, making sure that you take aim, firing that shot, and reholstering. That is a fundamental skill that you're going to need. If you cannot draw your gun while you are in a controlled environment like this from an outside the waistband holster, if you're in a situation to where you're carrying concealed under stress, it's going to be much more difficult for you. This is a drill that you should practice regularly. In this video, I'm going to take it to the next step and actually talk about the importance of why you need to practice drawing from concealment. The skills you need to know when drawing from concealment do not magically appear in your mind just because you have your concealed carry license. You need to spend the time on the range to develop those skills. Obviously, the weather outside affects the way that we dress. The cooler it is, the more layers of clothing that we may have. The warmer it is, the fewer layers of clothing. The way that we will conceal our firearms is personal choice, but it is certainly going to be influenced by the weather, by how we dress. There's also going to be advantages and disadvantages on the way that you carry your firearm. If you are carrying in deep concealment where you have a holster that'll let you tuck a shirt in, or if you have some type of a weapon band to where your firearm is underneath your clothing, you're going to have to get those clothes out of the way to access your firearm. Right now it's late October. The weather's starting to get a little bit cooler in the afternoons and early mornings. A light jacket is very common. And one of my preferred ways of carrying a firearm then is simply have an outside the waistband holster. This is my Serpa retention holster. And you know, it's easy to cover with the light jacket. Now, to access this firearm, if I ever needed it, I've got to get that jacket out of the way. And a light jacket like this is very easy. I can simply sling that and I have access to my firearm. Another little trick that will help you if you do decide to carry like that is to put a little something with weight in the pocket where your firearm is. You can see here I just have a roll of coins that I just put in my pocket. That extra weight, you can use your keys or whatever, but that little bit of extra weight will help you get that material back out of the way. And I'll just show you real quick, here's those coins that I had. You can see when I throw that jacket, that material wants to immediately just come right back. Now I do have time to get my firearm, but that material, you know, I have to put a little bit more force just to get it out of the way and get it back. But if I take a roll of coins or something, once again something that just has a little bit of weight, and I put it in that pocket, when I fling that material out of the way, that extra momentum really helps to carry that cloth. If you carry cross draw, your support hand can be used to get the fabric out of the way to where you can access your weapon. Now I've taken it to the level of deep concealment where I actually have an inside the waistband holster which allows me to tuck my shirt in, and I also have my jacket on. This adds even additional layers to getting access to that firearm. I need to get that jacket out of the way, I have got to get that shirt up out of the way, and I've got to get that firearm out of its holster. If you choose to carry your firearm just in your jacket pocket, you're setting yourself up for all kinds of issues. If you reach into that jacket and try to pull that out, you can see that your firearm is going to basically want to drag that jacket along with it. So you're going to have to grab that fabric, and then you're going to have to manipulate that weapon out of your pocket. Another disadvantage of this is if you have any kind of lint or anything else in that pocket, it's going to get into your firearm. Plus, if you carry your keys or other items in there, you do not need to carry a round in the chamber, because if something gets down in between there and actually hits that trigger, you can have an accidental discharge. The same thing can be said about carrying in your pants pocket. If you have your pistol there, you've got to dig down in there, get that pistol out. Once again, if you have anything in that pocket, it could hit that trigger if you carry a round in the chamber. So if you do choose to carry your firearm in a pocket, you need to get a pocket specific holster for your firearm. Guys, I want to give you something else to think about also. Where do you carry your cell phone? That can be a vital piece of equipment if you are ever in a situation where you've had to defend yourself. Do you carry your cell phone on the same side that you carry your firearm? If you do, you're setting yourself up for an added difficulty. You need to have your cell phone opposite of where you have your firearm to allow access. If you were ever to have that firearm out, if your cell phone is over here, you're either going to have to change hands with that firearm and reach and get it, then you're shooting with your weak hand, or you're going to have to try to manipulate around to access that cell phone. So that's something else to think about when you carry concealed, is where do you carry your cell phone? Guys, I can't stress it enough. However you choose to carry your firearm, get out on the range, practice drawing from concealment. Don't just practice one technique, practice a couple of them. Because as weather changes, as your dress throughout the year changes, you're going to need different skills to be able to access that firearm. This video, we're going to be talking about why it's important for you to carry a spare magazine. We're going to talk about the proper techniques of loading or reloading a semi-automatic firearm, and then we're going to be talking about how to deal with some basic malfunctions. The reason you want to carry a spare magazine is simply because you may need to fix that gun. In an event where something has happened to where your magazine has had a failure, whether the base plate has come off, which has happened, whether the magazine has fallen out for whatever reason, you're going to need to be able to get that gun back into service. And having a spare magazine does give you that advantage of having the extra ammo, but in many cases, instead of trying to fix a mess that magazine could turn into, simply dropping that one out and putting that spare mag in is going to give you a much faster response. The magazine release on most semi-automatic handguns is just a simple button. That's all it is. When you press that button, that magazine should come out of the gun fairly easily. There are a lot of folks out there that will add extended magazine releases to their firearms. I am not a big supporter of that, and if you go back and check out some of the other videos that I've done talking about it, you'll know why. The fact is, under stress, you could inadvertently hit that magazine release, drop that magazine out, and then you basically have a single shot pistol. That's something that you do not want. It was designed to be a little bit difficult to reach. Okay, you need to adjust your hand slightly in the way that you're gripping to be able to press that magazine release in order to drop that magazine out before you come in with that fresh magazine. If the grip on your gun is one that you cannot effectively adjust your hand and hit that magazine, you might want to try a different type of firearm, a different type of grip on your gun. That way, again, you need to make sure that you're using a gun that fits your hand. Now guys, we're going to actually go through some of this. First thing I want to talk about is, again, why you do not need an extended magazine release on your firearm. We're going to go ahead and chamber a round in my gun, and then if I was to get on target, and again with that extended magazine release, if I accidentally hit that magazine release, and you guys can see there, that magazine is loose. Okay, under stress, you may not even notice that, but we're going to go ahead and see what happens right here. Okay, so I'm going to aim onto my target, and I'm going to press that first shot, just like that. I've pressed that shot, but when I go again and I go to fire that next shot, all I get is a click. Okay, that is not what you want. You want to make sure that that mag is seated, and this is also going to get into dealing with those malfunctions. Simply take the bottom of your hand, slap the bottom of that magazine, and then cycle that action to make sure that that mag is seated properly, and then you should be able to chamber that round properly. Just like that. When you have gone to slide lock, this is what we're seeing here. We are now reached slide lock. That magazine needs to come out. I need to take my support hand, reaching towards wherever I keep my spare magazine. Putting that finger on the tip of that bullet, just by feel, I know which way that magazine is oriented. I'm going to adjust that gun in my hand just enough to be able to hit that magazine release, and then I'm going to press that magazine release, let that magazine fall home. Come in with my fresh magazine, insert it up over the top, let that action go just like that. Do not worry about trying to hit that slide release. Under stress, you're going to lose minor muscle control. You need to be thinking about large muscle groups. Doing the slingshot method is going to be more effective. Now that we have that new magazine in, I'm simply going to re-aim, press my shot, and again, there again, I have solved the problem. Another key point that you want to remember, whenever you ram that magazine home, that slide can fall on its own. Just the inertia can knock that slide stop loose. You still need to run that slide because you do not know whether or not that gun chambered a round. Okay, if I had a situation to where I ram it home and it falls, did it chamber a round? I don't really know. All I know is if I took aim and I press that trigger, all I got is a click. Okay, you do not want that. Each time that you slam that gun, slam that magazine home, run that action. And even if it spits out a cartridge, don't worry about it. You mainly want to make sure that you are loaded. You don't know for sure one way or another whether it loaded a round when you slammed it in and that slide went forward. Running that action on your own is going to help to ensure that you have a loaded gun. Okay guys, let's go through a top to bottom scenario. If there was a situation to where I needed to draw my firearm to defend myself, what would I do? Okay, I'd come out. If in the event I did something inadvertently, like that extended magazine release, if I hit it and let that magazine drop down slightly, I may not know that, okay? I may not know it till I press that trigger. So I'm going to take aim, okay? I want to make sure that I'm moving out of the situation. I'm going to press that shot, okay? I have fired that shot, but you'll notice the action of my gun is closed. I'm assuming that it just simply chambered another round. However, when I press that trigger again, all I get is a click. So what I need to do, make sure that magazine is seated properly, take my hand, ram it home, and run that action, okay? Make sure that you do that every time. Extend back out, fire my shot, okay? Now I have gone to slide lock. That slide lock is an indication that I have got to reload my gun. So my support hand moving to where my spare magazine is, that primary hand turning in my grip, just so you can see there, guys. I want to turn it slightly just where I can get to that magazine release. I'm going to let that magazine fall. I'm going to come out with my fresh mag. I am going to insert that fresh mag, ramming it home. Just because that slide went forward does not mean I don't follow my procedure, okay? I want to make sure that that gun is loaded. I want to make sure that I have a live round chambered. So now that I've got that magazine inserted, I'm running that action anyways. I don't care. You can see there, it spin out a casing, okay? I loaded that in deliberately to show you what I'm talking about. Doesn't matter. Let that round go. Make sure that gun is loaded. Now that I know it's loaded, I can extend back out, take aim on my target, press the shots just like that, okay? Very simple. Make sure to follow those steps precisely. Let's take a minute to talk about another type of malfunction that you can have. This is something that I've staged in this gun, and just to show you guys, what we have here is a double feed, okay? The indication that I have is that my slide is locked open, okay? So what do? I follow my procedure. Under stress, you want to minimize the amount of things that you need to do. You want to keep it as simple as possible, okay? Now that I know that that action is simply locked open, I don't know that I got a double feed. All I know is that I need to reload that gun, and that's exactly what you do. I go to press that magazine release. It does not come out, okay? If I cannot get that magazine to fall on its own, what I need to do is I need to strip that magazine out, throw it down, get it out of the way, bring up my fresh mag, insert it, and again, following my procedure, run the action of that gun, okay? And then extend out and fire. Just like that, guys. Make sure that you follow those procedures. I wanted to take a minute to show you guys something that you need to know about, especially if you have a Glock or something like that. This is an early model Gen 5. There are some of the differences between this version of the Gen 5 compared to some of the newer ones. If you go over to my channel, you can actually see where I talk about that. The early model Glocks, Gen 5s, had this little cutout here on the grip, and what that was for was to aid you in being able to strip the magazine out of that gun, okay? You can see there I have that opening to where I can grip it and strip it out just like that. If I look at the magazine for the Gen 5 compared to the earlier models, you can also see on that base plate that there is some differences as well. Okay, the Gen 5 base plate has a little bit more of a lip there, and it was again intended for you to be able to get a hold of that lip and strip that magazine out of the gun. Glock changed that in the following versions of the Gen 5, as well as a couple of other things. But again, this is a Gen 5, as you can see there on the side. But that is just something that I wanted to point out about the Glock firearms and why that is. But you still, regardless of what you have, if you have a situation to where you cannot get that magazine to come out on its own, you need to grip it and strip that magazine out of the gun. One thing you can use to simulate malfunctions with your handguns is simply use some spent casings. You can also use snap caps or other thing. What you want to do is you want to introduce some type of stress into your training. Okay, if you cannot perform it in training under a controlled environment, you're not going to be able to perform it under stress in a real life situation. You will not rise to the occasion. You will default to the level of training that you have mastered. Again, taking some spent casings, that's all I need for practicing these scenarios. Always remember, guys, what you want to do is solve as many problems as you possibly can without having to think about it. You want to simplify your reloading into the simplest form. If you have a problem, if you get just a click and no bang, the gun doesn't fire. Make sure that magazine is seated properly. If that gun has the action locked open, then reload the gun. Whether or not you have a double feed or whatever, it does not matter. Get that gun reloaded. Just remember those basic steps, follow those basic steps, and guys, again, do not try to hit that slide release. Under stress, you're going to miss it, okay? Use that slingshot method. It's going to work regardless of the type of gun that you're using. Guys, hope you liked the video. Be sure to leave me a comment down below. Check out the rest of the videos on my channel. Subscribe if you're new here. Check out all the links down below. Go over, become a channel member. Visit my website at boomsticktactical.com. Check out the rest of the videos in this playlist, and we'll see you next time.